President Truman always enjoyed playing the role of the homespun, easygoing man from Independence, Missouri. But those close to him knew that beneath this appearance, there was a hard, inflexible core of determination. In October of 1950, he prepares to meet a man who will test this strength, the flamboyant General Douglas MacArthur. Like Truman, he possesses an iron will. Like Truman, he is accustomed to wielding great power. So these two men will meet in a fateful rendezvous. The encounter is the prelude to a bitter controversy that will shadow both their lives. This is a story of men in crisis. In 1950, the fifth year of peace after World War II, the communist North Korean army, 90,000 strong, straddles the 38th parallel, ready to strike at free South Korea. It is Sunday, the 25th of June. In Washington, high-ranking administration officials are summoned to an emergency meeting at the White House. If the United States aids South Korea, the nation will be risking global war. So Secretary of State Dean Acheson will warn President Harry Truman. The safe course would be to avoid the problem, to issue a vigorous protest and let Korea fall. But Harry Truman had never taken the easy way. Within hours, American policy is crystallized. By the time Acheson and his assistant Dean Rusk leave the White House, American troops have been dispatched to Korea. Whatever the consequences, whatever the public opinion, Harry Truman had committed the nation to war. It was the toughest decision I ever made, says Truman. But he takes full responsibility for it. It is characteristic that the man from Independence, Missouri, has a sign on his desk reading, "The buck stops here." United States troops are rushed into Korea from Japan. They are still armed with the weapons of World War II, and softened by the years of peace, they are totally unprepared for what lies ahead. Within 48 hours, General Douglas MacArthur, the legendary hero of 2 world wars, takes command of the United States troops in Korea. This, he says, is Ma's last gift to an old warrior. Of the war in Korea, he writes, "I stood on a blood-soaked hill and watched for an hour the pitiful evidence of the disaster I had inherited." By midsummer, MacArthur's forces are pinned in the Pusan perimeter, an 80-mile pocket on the southern tip of Korea. To attempt a breakout would be dangerous and costly. MacArthur therefore decides on a tactic he used with great success during World War II. He will strike behind the enemy at his weakest point. He asks his aides, where on the Korean coast would they consider a landing impossible? When he's told Incheon, MacArthur says, "Good, then that's where we're going." Hurrying from Washington come representatives of the Joint Chiefs of Staff concerned about MacArthur's Incheon proposal. General Collins and Admiral Sherman are sent to talk MacArthur out of the operation. The gamble, says Collins, is too great. If the enemy has fortified Incheon, assault troops will be slaughtered on the beach. MacArthur's staff insists the element of surprise ensures success. Remarks Collins, "I wish I had MacArthur's confidence." September 15th, 1950. The UN Armada prepares to launch the complex and perilous Incheon invasion, conceived, planned, and executed by Douglas MacArthur. At 5:45 a.m., the invasion begins. Says MacArthur, "If I fail, the dreadful results will weigh on my soul until Judgment Day." At 6:30, the first assault phase begins. Meeting almost no resistance, it takes the troops an hour and 25 minutes to secure the beach. Incheon is a singular victory, a military feat born of intuition and imagination, and MacArthur is elated. In one stroke, MacArthur has reversed the entire situation in Korea. The North Korean army, caught between Incheon and Pusan, is trapped, and slowly the giant pincer begins to close. South Korean troops move north, amid reports that they intend to sweep through North Korea and unify the nation. A few days later, U.S. troops move north of the 38th parallel. The only jarring note in the victory parade is Communist China's warning that crossing the parallel will be considered an act of aggression. With victory in Korea virtually assured, Harry Truman announces that he will meet personally with MacArthur and express the nation's appreciation for his great service. Never having met MacArthur before, he exudes an almost boyish delight at the prospect of meeting one of the nation's great heroes. All of his life, Harry Truman admired men who shaped their own destiny. Relaxed and confident, MacArthur prepares to meet Truman at Wake Island. He knows the struggle in Korea will soon be over. At 71, the proud warrior savors the prospect of victory. He knows it might be his last. Douglas MacArthur was raised on military tradition. During World War I, he was known as the boy genius. A brilliant strategist, his daring frightened and bewildered his superior officers. Later, as the youngest chief of staff, his outspoken views made him America's most controversial peacetime soldier. A proud and confident man, in wartime he commanded leaders to listen, nations to follow. And with mystical self-assurance, he declared that no enemy could manufacture the bullet which would kill Douglas MacArthur. In contrast, Harry Truman followed an undistinguished road to the nation's highest office. As an army captain during World War I, Truman was known as a reliable officer who always followed orders. After the war, he failed in business and became a senator almost by accident. His political success was marked by unswerving dedication to party policy. President Roosevelt affectionately called him his most trustworthy senator, and in 1944 rewarded his service with the nomination for Vice President of the United States. Only when destiny suddenly thrust him into the office of president did his innate courage and conviction become apparent. For it took the office to bring forth the man. Sunday, October 15th, Wake Island. The President and the General meet for the first time. Observers note MacArthur does not salute his commander-in-chief. Newsmen are not allowed inside this meeting place, and what is said will later become a matter of controversy. MacArthur reportedly assures Truman the war in Korea will be over by Thanksgiving, that there is no threat of communist Chinese intervention. For the time being, the President and the General stand united on all matters of policy. To those observing the meeting, it is clear that the heroic soldier and the self-willed politician are separated by vast barriers of temperament, personality, and profession. In just 5 hours, the Wake Island Conference is over. They will not even spend the night on this historic island. At this very moment, the armies of Red China are massing in the rugged terrain which borders North Korea. November 1950. The Chinese Communist Army has marched on foot from Manchuria. Tough and battle-hardened, they confidently call themselves the phantom which casts no shadow. Now they are poised to strike. On November 25th, they launched their offensive. Stunned by the savage onslaught, the American troops retreat as the icy jaws of winter close in. MacArthur now orders strategic supply centers in Manchuria bombed to sever the enemy supply lines. But Truman's advisors warn that a U.S. attack in Manchuria would result in Russia's entering the war. The strike is abandoned. The fighting must be limited to Korea. MacArthur bitterly resents Washington's orders. As Supreme Commander of the Far East, he has made his decisions virtually without civilian interference. He will openly request that the administration officials change their policies and adopt instead his proposals. MacArthur now embarks on a perilous course almost without precedent in military history. He publicly urges that the war be extended to the Chinese mainland. In the wake of MacArthur's statements, England's Prime Minister Clement Attlee rushes to Washington. He fears MacArthur's attitude signals an impending change in U.S. policy. Above all, says Attlee, war with Red China must be avoided. Truman assures him that the war will remain limited to Korea. An angry Truman is reluctant to publicly clash with MacArthur. He knows the war in Korea is unpopular. Further arguments would only add confusion to an already bewildering situation. On December 6th, Harry Truman issues a directive to MacArthur. All public statements must be cleared with Washington before they can be released. The edict leaves MacArthur no choice. He has been told, in effect, that the war in Korea will be fought on terms dictated by Washington. The total victory he had envisioned is now being placed beyond his reach. If he were less proud, less determined, he would accept these orders. but he is MacArthur. On March 24th, 1951, without informing Washington, he issues his own ultimatum to Red China. Surrender, or war might be unleashed against the mainland, he declares. Washington is stunned. Urgently, orders are once again directed to MacArthur. Under no circumstances, under no condition, must any public announcements of any kind be issued. On April 5th, the crisis reaches its conclusion. Congressman Joseph Martin, House Minority Leader, makes public a letter he received from Douglas MacArthur. Dated March 20th, the letter criticizes Truman's actions in Korea. It closes with these words: "We must win. There is no substitute for victory." Sunday, April 8th, 1951, the Joint Chiefs of Staff confer at Truman's request. Men like Omar Bradley, who have devoted their entire lives to the military, now must sit in judgment on one of their own. Privately, they may wonder what they might have done in a similar situation. They may approve or condemn Truman's policy in Korea, but whether MacArthur is right or wrong is irrelevant. He has openly violated the presidential directive of December 6th, and to the professional soldier, the question is weighed, opinion reached. The Joint Chiefs of Staff favor the immediate removal of Douglas MacArthur from his command. Monday morning, Truman meets with his advisors. It is the moment of decision. His aides warn that MacArthur's prestige is so great, relieving him might set off a dangerous explosion of public outrage, and it might seriously undermine the nation's faith in the office of president. Truman does not hesitate. He orders, MacArthur must go. Before MacArthur can be officially notified, however, the news is already out. On the 11th of April at 1 a.m., a presidential announcement informs a stunned and mystified nation that a legendary hero has been dethroned. In a matter of hours, MacArthur is at Tokyo Airport. From the beginning, he has been aware of what might result from defying Truman, but with dignity and courage, he calmly accepts the consequences of his action. He gambled and lost. His military career is over. The future is suddenly dark and uncertain. To the press, he says nothing, and to his wife, he says simply, "Jeannie, we're going home at last." Now President Truman announces his decision to the American people.
I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy. It is with the deepest personal regret that I found myself compelled to take this action. General MacArthur is one of our greatest military commanders, but the cause of world peace is much more important than any individual.
After an absence of 15 years, MacArthur has returned. His presence ignites a tumultuous reaction, and now he states the reasons for his actions with familiar eloquence.
If it be that my relief was the spark which ignited this great power of American public expression, which caused our people to unite in a common crusade to effect a spiritual renaissance in American life, which provided the symbol for rallying the mighty forces for good throughout the land, then I would be thankful indeed to a far-seeing and merciful God, and could ask for no more.
For a man who has devoted his life to the military, to be relieved of command usually carries the stigma of public disgrace. But for General Douglas MacArthur, his reign becomes a personal triumph.
world has turned over many times since I took the oath on the plain at West Point, and the hopes and dreams have long since vanished. But I still remember the refrain of one of the most popular barrack ballads of that day, which proclaimed most proudly that old soldiers never die. They just fade away. And like the old soldier of that ballad, I now close my military career and just fade away. An old soldier who tried to do his duty as God gave him the light to see that duty. Goodbye.
For Harry Truman, the MacArthur controversy was the ultimate challenge of his personal strength. But driven by an ingrained sense of integrity, courage, and conviction, Truman refused to back down. Strong men, it is said, live by strong deeds.
It is not a question of who wants war and who wants peace. All men of good conscience earnestly seek peace. The method alone is the issue. Some, with me, would achieve peace through a prompt and decisive victory and a saving of human life. Others, through appeasement and compromise of moral principle, with less regard for human life. The one course follows our great American tradition. The other can but lead to unending slaughter and our country's moral debasement.
We have been urged to take measures which would spread the fighting in the Far East. We've been told that this would bring the Korean conflict to a speedy conclusion, that it would save the lives of our troops. In my judgment, that just isn't true. All of us wish that no Americans had to fight or die. But by fighting on a limited scale now, we may be able to prevent a third world war later on. Remember this. If we do have another world war, it will be an atomic war. We could expect many atomic bombs to be dropped on American cities, and a single one of them could cause many more times the casualties than we have suffered in all the fighting in Korea. I do not want to be responsible for bringing that about.
In the years which followed, Douglas MacArthur never questioned the president's authority to relieve him of command. He knew the political battlefield is a forbidden area to the American soldier, but he was fighting for a principle, and he refused to stop short of victory. Truman's decision prompted one of the most savage attacks of public opinion ever directed against a president. He bore this burden calmly. To Truman, conviction was more important than criticism.